Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Be Unstoppable podcast. My name is Brittany Cano, and I am your host. And I feel like every time I come on for another episode, I always say something that I'm really excited about. And this time, I am really excited because I am going home for the next week. We are headed out tomorrow, and then so I actually did this last year in August. I went home for about a week. Some of you may know, some of you may not know. I'm originally from San Antonio, and that's where literally my whole family lives. We have no family in Houston. It's just us. And so I'm going home, planning to see like my mom, my brother, my dad, and my grandparents, and I'm just really excited. I'm actually even throwing my grandparents a 59th wedding anniversary surprise party, and I am just super, super excited. I feel like growing up, family was a huge thing for me. I've always been super family oriented, and I'm like really close to my mom. And I remember growing up, I think it was like every Sunday, we used to always go to my great grandma's house, and she would like make breakfast. She'd make us breakfast, and she made like the best freaking breakfast potatoes ever. I still have not been able to make them as good as her to this day. And we would just watch movies all day long. And then we would like go, and then we would like get lunch. And like, I feel like everyone, that was like the house to be at, like all of my like cousins and like uncles and aunts. And like, they would always just kind of like filter there throughout the day. And it was just really cool because I felt like I was always, like seeing everyone. And so I'm just really excited. Last time I did this, I'm just like trying to get all my work done. And today after this, I'm filming my podcast right now. It's Friday, and I'm just going to cram until tomorrow morning. And I'm just really, really, really excited. As I feel like I get older, I really do cherish more of the alone time that I get with my mom. Sorry, guys, it's gnat season, okay, right now. And I've been asking people if everybody has gnats, and apparently they do, and that's just the case. And because I have these two big bright lights right here, they're just kind of floating around. So I'm doing my best to not let them distract me. But as I was saying, as I've been getting older, I feel like I just really cherish the, I guess, like one-on-one time that I get to spend with like my mom and like my dad, because we get so wrapped up in our lives, and like most of the time for us, it's so busy. And, sometimes I look in the mirror, and it's a strange thing to notice yourself getting older. But when I go back home, I notice that not only am I getting older, but so are my parents. And that is something that I really wanted to talk about on today's episode. Was our parents are doing the best they can. And I feel like this is something that I had to accept, and this was something that was hard for me to realize. And it did take me a long time to realize it, because obviously when I first started, like whenever I first had my first breakthrough session with Allie, I was really upset about my relationship with my dad. And I remember just as like we would go about coaching, one of the things that she told me is it your fault? No. Is it your dad's fault that he doesn't know you, or is it your fault? Yeah. Okay. Is it your, no. Oh my God, I always mess this up. Is it your dad's fault that he doesn't know who you are, or is it your fault that you're not showing him? And I feel like ever since then, I have almost, I don't know if this is like the correct word, but personified my parents. I feel like it's so easy to be like, oh, mom and dad have it all together, or, like whoever is like your parental figure in your life, like mom and dad have it all together. They have it all figured out. But one thing that really hit me hard one day is that this is their first time doing life too. This is their first time experiencing things. And I actually want to read you guys this thing that my mom sent me. My mom is like the cutest person ever, and she always sends me all of these like Facebook quotes, and she sent me this one, and it says 10 things your mom never told you. Number 1, you made her cry a lot. Number 2, she wanted the last piece of cake. Number 3, it hurt her when you behaved rudely. Number 4, she was always afraid. Number 5, she knows she's not perfect. Number 6, she watched you as you slept. Number 7, she carried you a lot longer than 9 months. Number 8, it broke her heart every time you cried. Number 9, she put you first every time over her. Number 10, she would do it all over again. And I think what really, really stuck with me, and I might get a little emotional because my mom is like my mom is my best friend. We have always been super close, and I was gonna say super tight, super close my entire life. And I think number 4, when it said she was always afraid, really it just kind of got to me, because our parents most of the times are our superheroes. You know, like we think that they're invincible. We think that they can take on anything, that mom and dad can do anything. And guys, they're struggling just as much as we are. I think it's been a cool transition, you know, because I feel like whenever you are healing, guys, we are all connected. Okay. So when you change, you are going to notice changes in other people. It's like a trickle effect, which is really, really cool. You know, I will say that I really didn't believe that at first. And as I kept going about it, it was almost like an instant change, like overnight. Like I feel like I didn't used to have like the best conversations with my dad. And when I started working on myself and I started being able to see things differently, right, through a different lens, I feel like his energy towards me was completely different too. And it was just like a really cool feeling. And I feel like being able to be there for my parents now has been one of my favorite things about being an adult. You know, like the other day, because guys, we're all human, right? Like we all have times where we call somebody or we're having a bad day and then like we hang up on someone, right? I'm sure like we've all done that at least one time in our life. And the other day I was calling my mom and I was like, oh, I can't talk right now. Can I call you later? And she was like upset and she hung up on me. And I was like, okay, like what's going on? And so she texted me and she was like, hey, I'm really upset right now. I will call you later. I'm okay and not call you later. And I just thought that was like such a big growth step on her end, because I know like in the past, like that would have caused us to get into like an argument. And so, you know, just as cool as it is to see our own growth, it's super cool to see the growth that happens in our parents too, right? Because guys, everybody can change, right? There's no like only you can change or this person's never going to change. I mean, maybe some people will never change, right? But if you want to change, you can change. And so that has been something that I have really, really enjoyed. And I guess quick detour, because I feel like that is a lesson on self-awareness, right? I will say that is something that I'm super proud of myself too. Like the other day, Art and I had, I wouldn't even say let's call it like we're having a little disagreement. And I feel like in the past, you know, sometimes whenever you're like having a conversation with your significant other and you guys have a disagreement, sometimes it's super easy to like get triggered and like get heated. And I feel like I have very much been that person. And I feel like I have finally gotten myself to the point, and this happened the other day, I finally got myself to the point the other day where we were like talking about something and I just didn't agree and I just was not happy with the way the conversation was going. And I asked him, I was like, hey, can I please remove myself from this conversation because honestly, right now, I'm not in the right state of mind. I feel angry, I feel upset, and I really don't think anything constructive can come from this emotional state. So I was really freaking, I mean, was it hard to say that in the moment? Yeah, absolutely. It was really freaking hard to say that, right? Sometimes some conversations are so uncomfortable, but when I thought about it, like after the fact and I had removed myself, I was like, honestly, Britt, like celebrate yourself right now because that is some huge growth. So I was really freaking proud about that. Moving on to the next part is I wanted to talk about how, have you ever heard like people say, oh, I don't want to be like my mom or I don't want to be like my dad. And I've always thought this is like an interesting concept because I feel like a lot of times the people that say that end up being exactly like their mom or exactly like their dad. And so, just as we inherit their nose, their freckles, their eyes, we inherit their beliefs and their values too, right? Which really are not even theirs, right? How we talked about a couple episodes ago. It's their parents, it's their grandparents, but they believe them to be theirs, so they pass them right on down to you. And what do, right? We gladly accept them as our own and we go about our own lives. Okay, so there is this psychologist and his name is Carl Jung. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's Jung, Carl Jung. And he was basically like one of the like first psychologists of our time that really discovered like this alter ego and like this shadow self, in turn like this other part of yourself, right? So I'm actually going to link, there is this YouTuber and what he does is he draws videos and they are super cool. They're really mind-blowing too, honestly. Like if you're ready to take a deep dive into some of this stuff, they are really, really interesting. So I feel like we go about life, right? Knowing our parents, grandparents' beliefs, values, right? Like we have all of this stuff planted into us when we're a child, right? It's called human domestication. And we're domesticated, right? Just like dogs, just like dogs and cats. And one day we wake up and we're like 25 years old and we start having a quarter life crisis. And we start asking ourselves questions. Who am I? Is this it? Do I want more for myself? What's my purpose? And I feel like this is the trivial turning point in someone's life because this is where you choose to awaken or you choose to stay asleep. There's this one quote and it says, some people die at 25, but they aren't buried until they are 75 years old. Let that sink in. Some people die at 25. They choose to stop growing. They choose to stop evolving. They just stay complacent. And it's just like this cycle that they keep putting themselves through, but they're not chasing their passions. They're not chasing their dreams. They're not fulfilling themselves. They're just settling. They're just being complacent. And they're not buried until they are 75 years old. That is wild. And this guy that I told you, the one who draws YouTube videos, there's this scene and it's all these people, right? It's like this one guy and he's in a crowd and he has the courage to take off this mask. And he's like looking up at this screen, right? And this screen is telling everybody who they're supposed to be, what you're supposed to look like, what you're supposed to wear, what you're supposed to think that you're supposed to want, what you think your life is supposed to be. And he wakes up and he takes off his mask and he's like, this is not who I am. And back to Carl Jung, he says, man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. As far as we discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. So remember we talked about that our subconscious mind is our blueprint, right? It knows everything about us, every thought, every breath, every word, every interaction that we have ever had. It's there, right? It's kept a record of your whole life, every negative self-talk, every time someone's been mean to you, every time you've smiled, every time someone's made you excited, or maybe you were good at something that you first tried. It's there. Everything is there. So keep following me here, okay? Jung has a term which he explains is the shadow self, okay? This is the part of our unconscious mind believed to hold all things about ourselves that we repress, whether because they are evil, socially unacceptable, harmful to others, or detrimental to our own health. Our shadow embodies our inner darkness, the things about ourselves that we hide, the damage we experience in our lives but never fully heal, the desires we cannot satisfy. He explains that the qualities in our shadow were determined by the things we most criticize in others, which is really interesting because we know that people are our mirrors, okay? Our entire life is a reflection of how we think. This is why you and I can be in a room. We can be talking. So let's say you and I, we're talking to Susan, right? It's the three of us. We're having the same conversation, right? Talking about this amazing chicken pot pie recipe, right? And she's just going on about this whole conversation, maybe talking about how her kids like the chicken pot pie and her grandkids, and she takes it to her neighbors, right? She's just going on this elaborate story, right? You and I heard the same story. But somehow, we interpret it differently. And that is because we see things as we are, not as they are, right? Think about another example is two kids grow up in the same household, right? Same mom and dad. They grew up there both until they were 18 years old. They have two completely different childhoods. And that's because we are all so individualistic. We are all so different, and our brains decide to attach meaning to different things. So when we judge, gossip, or spread negativity about someone, what we are actually doing is rejecting ourselves. In the moment, we do it to make ourselves feel better, right? It's this instant gratification, this sense of an inflated ego. And it makes for that instant gratification zing, right? But have you ever noticed that when you do that, maybe you're talking to your friends, right? And they're like going about you and you're like, oh my gosh, this girl is XYZ. And your friend is like, yeah, oh my gosh, did you see her do this? XYZ, right? You get that instant gratification feeling. But I want you to think about what happens when you're talking about someone and it's in a negative way, and it's like you're trying to spread this poison, and that person kind of deflects and they don't say anything. Have you ever experienced that and you're just there feeling super crappy? It leaves you feeling disgusted. It leaves you feeling dirty. It makes you feel like you're just full of poison, you know? And it is in this moment that we realize we do not accept this in this other person because this is something that we do not accept within ourselves. Oof. You know, I think this is something that we all go through until we know better. I mean, I'll admit I've had my fair share of not being the best person and talking about others, especially when I was in high school and when I was in college. And it's definitely something that comes with growth. I do not think that it's necessarily something that comes with age because some people never truly wake up and get themselves out of it. Don't get me wrong, you know, I still have mental battles, but I feel like I've transitioned now to versus in the past, whenever I used to want to talk about someone, now if I'm having a conversation with something and I feel something triggering within myself, I ask myself, why is this bothering me? And I wanted to share this because I don't know if you guys have ever read, I'm like all about books, the Four Agreements. It's a small little book. I think it's only 140 pages, but the book is so small. But I feel like these teachings in here are so, what's the word that I want to say? Like these teachings in here. Huh? Not deep. I don't want to say like mind blowing. Okay, I don't know. I guess these teachings are just kind of like mind blowing, like whenever you first read them. So basically, it talks about the domestication of the planet, right? How we're domesticated just like cats and dogs, how I was talking a little bit about earlier. And it goes to just such in depth detail. And you are literally like, what the F? Like, this is insane. The first time I read it, I feel like my head blew off. It was so, because you're reading these things and you know them to be true, but no one ever says this. Like, this isn't the things that are in this book. No one ever goes around and is like, oh yeah, we're domesticated like cats and dogs. So anyways, there's like basically four different like laws, right, that you have to follow. So the first, four different agreements, sorry, not laws. The four different agreements. So the first one is be impeccable with your word. And with this one, I wanted to read because how I was talking about like gossiping and just like spreading negativity. So he says, the human mind is like a fertile ground where seeds are continually planted. The seeds are opinions, ideas, and concepts. You plant a seed, a thought, and it grows. The word is like a seed. The human mind is so fertile. The only problem is that too often it is fertile for the seeds of fear. Every human mind is fertile, but only for those kinds of seeds it is prepared for. What is important is to see which kind of seed our mind is fertile for and to prepare it to receive the seeds of love. Take the example of Hitler. He sent out all of those seeds of fear, and they grew very strong and beautifully achieved massive destruction. Seeing the awesome power of the word, we must understand what power comes out of our mouths. One fear or doubt planted in our mind can create an endless drama of events. And this is where I wanted to get into it. One word is like a spell. And humans use the word like black magicians, thoughtlessly putting spells on each other. Every human is a magician, and we can either put a spell on someone with our word, or we can release someone for a spell. And I thought this was really interesting, and I wanted to talk about this because the power of our word is so impeccable, right? It has so much power, truly more than you'll ever know. And this is a really good example. Have you ever like shown up somewhere and your friend is like, you look so tired, and then all of a sudden you start to feel tired? You look at yourself in your mirror and maybe you see like your hair's kind of messed up and you have like little eye bags and you're just like looking really tired. Maybe your eyes are red. Maybe you're not that put together and you're like, man, she is right. I do look tired. Actually, I do feel tired. Right there. Boom, agreement. She told you that you look tired and you just agreed and you made that agreement. And so now that's something that you believe. And isn't that kind of crazy how simple that is? You know, he gives another example of cancer, right? I think we may have mentioned this a little bit in another podcast. Honestly, guys, I feel like I don't even know what I've said the past few podcasts because I feel like whenever I come on here and talk, I have an idea of what I want to talk about and then I just go in depth. But, you know, I feel like just as everything, I feel like just as like humans, we are so all interconnected and intertwined. So are all of these teachings, and I feel like just because I talk about belief on one podcast, maybe I'm going to share something different about belief, right? Like how I said last episode, we are like onions and things happens in layers, right? There isn't just one layer to belief. There are probably hundreds, right? There's a lot of layers of belief that I've discovered, and there's a lot of layers of belief that are yet to be discovered by me. So I just wanted to say that in case I do repeat anything. And if anything, right, it's a good reminder because one, it's teaching me. Two, it's teaching you. And if this is your first time hearing it, well, even better. So he talks about, let me see. He said, I see the kind of color in your face in people who are going to get cancer. And he's saying if his friend listens to the word and if he agrees, he will have cancer in less than 1 year. That is the power of the word. After that, he says, during our domestication, our parents and siblings give their opinions about us without even thinking. We believe these opinions and we lived in fear over these opinions, like not being good at swimming or sports or writing. Someone gives an opinion and says, oh, that part doesn't matter. Okay, so like not being good at swimming or sports or writing. And I feel like this is bringing it full circle a little bit, right? Because in the beginning, we talked about how sometimes people say, oh, I never want to be like my mom, or I never want to be like my dad. I never want to be like my parents. And then subconsciously, right? Because we don't dig into those parts of ourselves, right? When we're 25 or we're having our quarter life crisis, we feel unhappy. We feel a sense of discontentment. And that is the part in our life, right, where we are meant to take off our mask and shed this identity of who people told us to be and discover who we are actually truly meant to be. And I feel like when you don't, that is where resentment sneaks in, because we are all here for a purpose. You are not here for your mom's purpose. You are not here for your dad's purpose or whoever raised you. You are solely here to fulfill your own divine purpose. Your parents did the best they could, right? And, talking about this domestication, it's not saying it's good or bad. It's just what we experience as humans, right? This is what has come to be true with the way that the world works, right? And our parents are doing the best they can just because the way that they raised us, there's no good or bad. It is just it is what it is, Have you heard that saying? Obviously, it's a cuss word, but it says, your family is going to mess you up, but it's your fault if you stay messed up. And I feel like this crucial time in your life is the turning point, because whenever you take off that mask, whenever you take off that mask, this is the crucial time to ask yourself, what is it that I want? What is it that I want to be? Do I believe this? Do I believe that? And, I feel like I went through very much so my own version of that, especially with religion. I grew up Catholic, and then whenever I was in college, I kind of transitioned into being Christian, and I would go to Christian churches. And I just felt like with the dynamics that I had with my dad growing up, it felt really wrong for me to resort to God as a he. And I just felt like there was so much disconnect. And I feel like I really struggled with my spirituality for a long time because I couldn't get it incongruent within myself to figure out what I believed, because I felt like I just believed what everyone taught me, right? Like what I was domesticated to believe. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it just wasn't sitting right. And I wanted to figure out my own way to go about it, right? What do I believe? What is it that I want to believe? And what do I want to achieve with this, right? What kind of relationship do I want to have? And I feel like that goes for every single arena of your life, right? You know, you can grow up and you can be told what kind of friends you're supposed to have, or what kind of relationship you're supposed to have, or what is your role in a relationship, what is your role in a friendship, what are you supposed to do, right? You're supposed to graduate high school, go to college, get a real job. And guys, all these are is it's just people's opinions, it's just people's beliefs, because that's what they were taught and they made them out to be true. It's just what it is, and that's it. I know I've been going on a few tangents here, and now I'm really bringing it back full circle. Okay, so that's why I was kind of getting to the point of, like the poison, and it's important not to judge, right? And I know I kind of talked about it in a lot of different areas, but this podcast is mainly focused on your parents, because I feel like when you go about your healing, and I also want you to know that it's really important to know the difference between our generation and our parents' generation. I was actually having a conversation with my mom yesterday about this, because I talk to my mom a lot about the things that I've learned and just different lessons and teachings, because I feel like just as they have brought me just as they have improved my quality of life, I know that if she can learn the lessons just as well as I can, it can improve her quality of life as well. So I was talking to her about this the other day, because I feel like sometimes, like, I brought it up, and I've had people tell me, like, oh, like, mental health isn't real, like, you're just complaining, or depression isn't real, anxiety isn't real. And I think the main difference between our generations is that you have to realize, guys, back in the day, like maybe the 1800s, think about what would happen if you were to say, I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, or I'm feeling this certain way. They did lobotomies, and you would be put in like a mental hospital or a mental asylum, or they would think you were crazy, or they would think you were shunned, right? So evolutionarily speaking, if you think about it, right, think about natural selection. In a sense, those people would die, right? Because they would go off and they would be like shunned from society, right? And you got to think about it like evolutionary wise, man needs community. We need to be surrounded by others. So whenever you are like shunned from society, that's one of your like basic essential needs and can potentially kill you. And so if you think about it, it only makes sense that if you're going through something, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Push it down, because think about how many people related having anything to do with mental health as bad, right? So they learn to shove it down. They learn not to talk about it, because what if they didn't talk about it? It's going to keep them safe. And I think that's so important to realize, because now, right, like think about it. We talk about trauma all the time, right? And trauma looks different for every single person, right? There's big T trauma and there's little t trauma, right? Like big T trauma, for example, could be like sexual abuse, right? And little t trauma could be like maybe you got the silent treatment when you were little, right? There is so many, you can look it up. There's so many different types of trauma, and no trauma is considered equal, because we all attach a different meaning to them. So just like us, right? Now I talk to my mom and I'm like, oh, well, growing up, this kind of hurt my feelings, or I know that I attach this meaning to this, and that's why I think like this now, but like I'm trying to work on this. And sometimes my mom is like, what? Because when they were little, guys, they didn't talk about these things, they just kind of went throughout childhood and learned to accept it for what it was. And it's not something that they really digged into. It's just something that they kind of shoved down, right? Therapy was not as popular as it is now. And I feel like when I think about this, and sometimes I think about how sometimes older people in older generations are so angry, it makes sense. Think about everything that they're holding on to, that they couldn't talk about, that they couldn't let go. And it's weird to say because now I'm just like, no, I need to talk about it. No, I need to get it out. If I have an altercation with someone, I'm like, hey, we need to talk about this because I feel like this has been going on and I don't really feel comfortable. It's like I am all for sitting down and having a hard conversation now, but your parents don't know how to do that. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because it's so important to have compassion, not only for them, but for other people that are around you. Whenever you are choosing to grow, you have to realize that not everyone is choosing to grow with you or around you, right? You have to realize that people grow on their own time. And as cool as it is that you're learning all of this new information and all of this new knowledge, and you so desperately want to put it to good use, and you so desperately want to tell the whole entire world because you know how much it can improve and help them and just enrich their lives. Not everybody wants the same thing. And right, how we were talking about judgment, it's important not to judge, and it's important to accept them as they are, right? I'm not saying that you can't teach them. You can, most definitely, right? Like if you have some people in your life that you want to share your new knowledge with, by all means, go ahead, but don't force it. People have to come around at their own pace. And just because you're ahead doesn't necessarily make you better than anyone else, right? I think I mentioned earlier, who were you before you had this knowledge? You were just doing the best you could, just like everybody else is. Especially your parents, I feel like as you go about your healing, I learned this thing that they said a lot of times, like when you go to therapy and you go for one parent, you realize that the problem is the other parent. And that was really hard for me to accept, like really freaking hard for me to accept, right? Because I told you that my mom is my best friend, and I remember when I first started, I was talking about all of the issues that I had with my dad, right? And I got through a lot of it. I worked through so much of it, and then come to realize I felt like the problem was my mom. And when I felt like that, and it's nothing she did, right? Because at all times, our parents are doing the best they can. It's just what my baby Brittany brain, I love to say that, my baby Brittany brain, what meaning she attached to it. And whenever I went through that, I was devastated because I was like, here I am my whole life making my dad out to be the villain, right? Which in turn, that's not even the case, right? I just had this wall up and this perception of who I thought he was and this role I played. But when I was able to forgive him and accept the role that I played too, that is a really important factor, right? Because it's not one-sided, right? It takes two to tango, right? It takes two to be in any form of a relationship. And so whenever I accepted my role and who I was being, right, how I said earlier, is it my dad's fault that he doesn't know who I am, or is it my fault that I'm not showing him what were the actions that I was or were not taking that got me to where I was? And whenever I figured out like what was my mom's role in that was really hard for me to accept too. And I remember we went through these couple months, and I really wasn't talking to my mom that much. I think it was in 2021. And I told her, I was like, hey, and one thing I love about my mom is that she has been so supportive throughout everything. And even when she didn't understand, and I feel like that means the world to me because, guys, sometimes we're not going to understand what people are going through, but you can always accept them in the process. You can always be supportive in the process. Even with art, he didn't know what he was signing up for whenever I first wanted to start coaching with Allie. And there was a lot of stuff that came up for me. And so I'm grateful for everybody that I have in my life, but especially, my mom, because I know some of the stuff at the beginning she took a little bit personal, but she really pulled through for me and learned to put herself aside and try to understand what I was going through, even if she really couldn't understand. And that means more to me. I know she watches my podcast, so that means more to me than she'll ever know, because what does everybody want, right? Everybody wants to be accepted. Everybody wants to be loved. And at the end of the day, we are just all trying to figure it out, and it's hard. And, that's why I'm saying we need to have compassion for our parents, because guys, I'm like sitting here telling her, I'm not telling her that she's the problem, but I'm telling her that her actions, these are the actions that she did, and this is the meaning that I attached to it. And it's like, think about how wrong that conversation could have gone, right? Someone could easily get offended or like start to put a wall up or try to defend themselves. But that wasn't how it played out for me. And that's something that I'm really grateful for, because we are all going to attach meaning to things in our own different ways, just how she has, just how I have, just how every single person has. And to be able to have compassion for our parents in this way is honestly game changer, I said personify, I think earlier, to humanize them, and to realize they are doing the best they can with everything that they know, and also to accept that there's nothing that I would have changed about my upbringing. I'm very grateful for the life that I have had and the life that I have lived, especially my childhood, because everybody played their part. And, sometimes I think that it's so easy to, this is going to hit hard. Sometimes I think it's so easy to be like, oh, I wish my dad would have done this. I wish my mom would have done this, right? And put that blame on them. But guys, if he would have been the dad that I wanted, I wouldn't have became the person that I became, right? Because we are all here for a reason, right? When we get here, before we get here, our soul makes this contract, and it's like, all right, I'm going in. This is what I'm supposed to do. We go down this big slide, and then boom, we get here and we forget. But this is what we're supposed to go through, right? I see myself on huge stages in the future talking to thousands and thousands of people and sharing my life story and all these lessons that I've learned. But who's to say that I would have got there if I didn't have the upbringing that I did, which is a really cool topic to wrap your mind around. I just feel like whenever you don't blame and you whenever you don't blame and you take responsibility, it just gives you so much of your power back. And that power can push you so far than you can even comprehend. I remember, different topic here, but I remember there was this one day, I think it was whenever I had went home in August last year, and I was with my mom and my grandma, and my mom, I don't know what we were talking about, but my mom started crying and she started hugging my grandma. And, just sitting there, and I'm like watching my mom cry, and my grandma's holding her and comforting her, and I'm just sitting there analyzing what's going on. And I'm like, my mom is human. My mom has moments. If I were crying right now, my mom would be holding me. And just to like think about that, and it's like, I feel like sometimes you just have to flip the script and realize that it's not always about you. There are other people living in this world, and they're just doing the best they can. So I guess to sum it up, I think the main takeaway that I want you guys to have is just to have compassion for your parents. I said it like 50,000 times, and I really couldn't say it anymore, because I feel like that's one that I really had to ingrain in my mind to get it through. and have compassion for your parents in every area of life. You know, just as I said, they are doing the best they can. You are doing the best you can. And I feel like, you know, as you embark on this personal growth journey, teach them things, you know, tell them things that excite you, tell them new things that you learned and that are enriching your life and that you want to help enrich theirs. You know, you got to think it's so much easier for you to pick up a book or you to listen to a podcast or you to watch something that's motivational or, you know, like going to help get you through than I feel like it is for them. I feel like our parents are getting older and we are too. And just soak it in and be grateful for them, you know, because without them, you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be you. So that's it for this week, guys. Just want to say thank you so much again for tuning in. Next week, there will be no episode because I will be out of town, but I will definitely keep you guys updated. So cheers to you. Cheers to me. It's time to become everything we were meant to be. See ya.